I'm Heath, 27 now. But 10 years ago, I was just a scared 17-year-old standing on my parents' porch with nothing but a backpack and $50 to my name. "You'll be back begging in a month," my mother smirked, arms crossed over her chest. My father simply slammed the door in my face. The sound echoed through me like thunder, but something inside me hardened that day. I swore I'd never go back, never beg, and I kept that promise. If you're watching this from somewhere familiar, drop a comment below and subscribe to hear how I turned betrayal into triumph. Growing up in Ridgefield, a pristine suburban neighborhood outside Seattle, my childhood looked picture perfect from the outside. Our two-story colonial with its manicured lawn and white picket fence was the embodiment of the American dream. My father, Maxwell, ran a successful construction company that specialized in luxury homes. He was a tall, imposing man with calloused hands and a perpetual furrow between his brows. He rarely smiled, measuring his self-worth by the contracts he secured and the respect he commanded. My mother, Eleanor, was a former beauty queen who had traded her pageant sash for a real estate license, though she only worked part-time. Her real full-time job was maintaining our family's social standing. She was obsessed with appearances, constantly redecorating our home to match the latest trends and scrutinizing my wardrobe to ensure I looked like the son of a respectable family. From kindergarten onward, my parents had mapped out my entire future. They had a very specific vision that included an Ivy League education, a professional degree, and eventually taking over my father's business. There was never any discussion about what I wanted. My opinion simply didn't matter. The Millers know what's best. My mother would tell the neighbors at her lavish dinner parties. Heath is going to follow in his father's footsteps, but with a business degree first, of course. She would ruffle my hair affectionately in front of guests, but behind closed doors, that same hand would point out every flaw, every shortcoming. The pressure intensified when I entered high school. Suddenly, every grade, every extracurricular activity, every friendship was scrutinized for how it would look on college applications. My parents had their hearts set on Harvard, or at the very least Princeton, where my father's brother had attended. "You need to join more clubs," my father would say over dinner, not bothering to look up from his plate. "The debate team or student government. Colleges want well-rounded students." But I wasn't interested in debate or student government. In my freshman year, I discovered music production when our school received a grant for a small recording studio. The moment I adjusted those levels and mixed my first track, something clicked. I found myself spending every free period in that studio, learning everything I could from our music teacher, Mr. Reyes. Around the same time, I began teaching myself coding, fascinated by the technology behind digital audio workstations. Hours would disappear as I experimented with creating my own music or building simple programs. My parents dismissed these passions immediately. Childish hobbies, my mother called them. Something to outgrow. "You can tinker with that garbage on your own time," my father said, "but not at the expense of your real studies." Junior year became a battleground. I started questioning why I was working so hard for a future I never chose. Why was I taking AP calculus when I hated math? Why was I staying up until 2 in the morning studying for tests in subjects I would never use in the career I actually wanted? I started making friends my parents didn't approve of, kids who were creative and passionate about arts and music. Carlos was into hip-hop production. Zoe was a talented guitarist who introduced me to underground bands. Lucas coded video games in his spare time. They weren't the clean-cut, academically focused peers my parents wanted me to associate with, but they were the first friends who actually saw me, who valued what I had to offer. "Those kids will drag you down," my mother warned. "That Martinez boy's parents don't even own their home." The breaking point came when I skipped an SAT prep class to attend a music technology workshop with a producer I admired. My father found the receipt for the workshop in my jeans while my mother was doing laundry. That night, they confronted me at dinner. "You deliberately lied to us," my father thundered, slamming his fist on the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. "We paid good money for that prep class. I'm not interested in the SAT," I tried to explain. "I've been looking at specialized music production programs that care more about portfolio work than standardized tests." My mother's face went white. No son of mine is going to waste his potential on something so unstable. Do you want to be a starving artist? Is that your plan? I tried to tell them about the growing industry, about the careers in sound engineering, about the technology companies hiring audio specialists. They wouldn't listen. What they didn't know was that I had already applied to several programs, using money I had saved from a part-time job at the mall. I'd had Mr. Reyes write my recommendation letters and used my friend's address for correspondence. The acceptance letter from the California Institute of Music and Technology arrived on a Tuesday. My mother collected the mail that day, and when I came home from school, I could tell something was wrong. The letter was sitting opened on the kitchen counter. "You went behind our backs," my father said, his voice dangerously quiet. "After everything we've done for you, you opened my mail," I countered, anger rising in my chest. "That's illegal. Don't you dare talk to us about legality when you've been lying and sneaking around," my mother hissed. "This school isn't even accredited." "It is accredited," I shot back. "You just don't care enough to check. They have a 96% job placement rate, and their alumni work for major studios and tech companies." "Enough," my father roared. "This discussion is over. You're not going to California, and you're not wasting your life on this music nonsense. It's time you grew up and faced reality." But for the first time in my life, I wasn't backing down. The reality they couldn't see was that I had found my path, my passion, and I was prepared to fight for it, even if it meant standing alone. The final confrontation happened on a Friday in April, just 2 months before graduation. I had received an email that morning about a partial scholarship to the California program, contingent on submitting a final portfolio piece within the week. I came home from school energized, determined to talk to my parents one more time, to make them understand how serious I was. I found them in the living room, my father reading the newspaper, my mother flipping through a home decorating magazine. "I need to talk to you both about my future," I began, standing tall despite my racing heart. My father lowered his newspaper slowly, his jaw tight. "There's nothing to discuss. We've already decided." "No, you decided," I countered. "But it's my life, a life we've provided for," my mother interjected. "Everything you have, we gave you, and I'm grateful," I said carefully. "But I need to follow my own path. The California Institute offered me a partial scholarship. I can work to cover the rest. I've thought this through." My father stood abruptly, towering over me. "You want to throw away a real education for some hippie music school? Not while you live under my roof." "Then maybe I shouldn't live under your roof anymore," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. A dangerous silence filled the room. My mother's eyes narrowed. "Is that so?" my father asked, his voice cold. "You think you can make it on your own? Without our money? Without our support?" "I'd rather try than spend my life doing something I hate," I responded. My father's face turned purple with rage. "Then go. If you're so determined to ruin your life, you won't do it on my dime. You have 30 minutes to pack what you can carry. Anything else stays." I thought he was bluffing. Even as I went upstairs and stuffed clothes into my backpack, I kept expecting them to come up, to tell me we would talk about it rationally. But 30 minutes later, my father was standing by the front door, watching as my mother thrust $50 into my hand. "This is the real world's way of teaching you a lesson," she said with that smirk I'll never forget. "You'll be back begging in a month." My father didn't even speak. He simply opened the door, waited for me to walk through, and slammed it behind me. The sound was final, deafening in the quiet suburban evening. I stood on the porch in shock. Through the window, I could see them return to the living room, my father picking up his newspaper as if nothing had happened, as if their only son wasn't standing outside with nowhere to go. Reality hit me as the sun began to set. I had $50, a cell phone that they would surely cut off soon, a backpack with a few changes of clothes, my laptop, and not much else. I had a car, but it was in my parents' name, and the keys were inside on my dresser. That first night, I walked 3 miles to a 24-hour diner and sat in a booth until morning, nursing the cheapest item on the menu, trying to figure out what to do. The waitress, an older woman named Darlene, kept refilling my water without charging me. I think she could tell I was in trouble. When morning came, I called Carlos. His parents had a strict household, but when he explained my situation, they let me crash on their couch for a few days. "Just until you figure something out," his mother said kindly, though I could see the concern in her eyes. Those first weeks were a crash course in adult reality. I learned that without an address, applying for jobs was nearly impossible. Without a cosigner, finding an apartment was out of the question. Without experience, my employment options were severely limited. My phone service was cut off within days, just as I'd expected. I bought a cheap prepaid phone with some of my precious $50, knowing I needed a way for potential employers to contact me. I bounced between friends' houses, trying not to overstay my welcome anywhere. Zoe's family let me stay in their guest room for a week. Lucas snuck me into his basement for a few nights when his parents were out of town. But I couldn't keep imposing on people forever. After 2 weeks of job hunting, I finally found work washing dishes at a local diner, the same one where Darlene had shown me kindness that first night. The pay was minimal, but they let me work off the books, and the cook would set aside leftover food for me at the end of shifts. Every night, as I scrubbed pots and pans until my hands were raw, doubts would creep in. Maybe my parents were right. Maybe I had made a terrible mistake. Maybe I should swallow my pride and go home. I found myself walking past our house one night, staring up at the windows, at the life I'd left behind. The lights were on in the living room. Through the window, I could see my mother on the phone, laughing. My father was in his recliner, watching TV. They seemed completely unaffected by my absence. That's when I realized they were expecting me to come crawling back, to admit defeat. Instead of turning up the walkway, I squared my shoulders and kept walking. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I would find another way. The lowest point came about 3 weeks after I'd left home. The series of couches I'd been surfing had run out, and I spent a night sleeping in the park, using my backpack as a pillow, jumping at every sound. I was exhausted, dirty, and beginning to think I'd made an awful mistake. That morning, shivering and stiff, I counted my money. After buying the prepaid phone and minimal food, I had $27 left. Not enough for a motel, not enough for anything, really. For the first time, real fear gripped me. What if I couldn't do this? What if I ended up truly homeless? I walked to work with a heaviness in my chest, wondering if this would be the day I admitted defeat. But when I arrived at the diner, Darlene took one look at me and pulled me aside. "You slept outside, didn't you?" she asked bluntly. I couldn't even answer, just looked down at my shoes. She sighed deeply. "My son's room has been empty since he joined the army. It's not much, but it's yours if you need it. Just until you get on your feet." Her kindness nearly broke me. I had to turn away so she wouldn't see the tears threatening to fall. That simple offer of shelter from someone who barely knew me was the lifeline I needed, just when I was about to go under. "I can pay some rent," I insisted. "Not much, but something." "We'll figure it out," she said, patting my shoulder. "Sometimes life takes unexpected turns. Doesn't mean the journey is over." That night, in a stranger's spare bedroom with faded army posters still on the walls, I made a promise to myself. I would never go back to my parents' house as a failure. I would build something of my own, something they couldn't take credit for or take away from me. Their rejection would become my motivation. Living with Darlene bought me the stability I desperately needed. With a fixed address, I could apply for better jobs and start rebuilding. I worked double shifts at the diner, saving every penny, determined to be self-sufficient as quickly as possible. After a month, I spotted a help wanted sign in the window of Soundwave, a local music store that sold instruments and equipment. The starting pay wasn't much better than the diner, but it was in an industry I cared about. I spent an entire evening crafting a resume that stretched my minimal experience as far as it would go. The manager who interviewed me was Carlos, a 40-something guy with tattoo sleeves and kind eyes. He seemed unimpressed by my resume, but perked up when I started talking about digital audio workstations and the mixing projects I'd done in high school. "You actually know your stuff," he remarked, sounding surprised. "Most kids your age who come in here just want employee discounts on guitars." "I'm serious about audio production," I told him. "I was planning to study it before things changed." Carlos gave me a long look. "Life rarely goes according to plan, kid. I was supposed to be touring with a band right now, not managing a retail store. But sometimes detours teach you more than the main road." He hired me on the spot, and just like that, I had my first foothold in the industry I loved. Working at Soundwave was educational in ways formal schooling could never be. During slow periods, Carlos would teach me about different equipment, let me experiment with the display models, and introduce me to industry people who came through the store. More importantly, he became the mentor I desperately needed, someone who understood both my passion for music and the reality of making a living from it. Education matters, he told me one day, as we unpacked a shipment of mixing boards, but not necessarily the kind your parents wanted for you. You need to keep learning, just differently. On his recommendation, I enrolled in night classes at the community college, studying audio engineering. The tuition was a fraction of what university would have cost, and I could work around my store hours. I couldn't afford textbooks, so I spent weekends at the public library, taking detailed notes from reference materials I couldn't check out. By the 6-month mark, I had saved enough to move out of Darlene's house, though she protested that I could stay longer. I found 2 roommates through a store customer, Jake and Marcus, both aspiring musicians who needed a third person to make rent affordable. Our apartment was tiny, with paper-thin walls and temperamental plumbing. Jake worked as a barista and played guitar in local venues. Marcus was a nighttime security guard writing rap lyrics during his shifts. Between the 3 of us, we barely made rent each month, but we had created a home of sorts, complete with a makeshift recording setup in the corner of our living room. Life settled into a grinding routine. I worked at Soundwave during the day, attended classes 3 nights a week, picked up weekend shifts at the diner to make extra money, and used any remaining time to work on building my portfolio. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. During this period, I learned the true value of $1. Every purchase was scrutinized, every expense questioned. Did I really need new shoes? Or could I duct tape the old ones for another month? Was name-brand cereal worth the extra $2? Could I walk instead of taking the bus to save on fare? The contrast between this existence and my previous life was stark. I thought about my parents' house with its spacious rooms and well-stocked refrigerator. I remembered complaining when my mother bought the wrong brand of jeans, or when dinner wasn't something I felt like eating. Those complaints seemed incredibly petty now that I was living on ramen noodles and working 60-hour weeks. But despite the hardships, there was something empowering about supporting myself. Each bill I paid on my own felt like a victory. Each successful project I completed for class was proof that I could make it in my chosen field without my parents' approval or financial backing. Small wins kept me going. My first A in an audio engineering course. The day Carlos trusted me to handle a significant customer order on my own. The evening Jake and Marcus invited some friends over to hear a track I'd produced, and everyone asked for copies. There were setbacks too, of course. 6 months into my new life, my ancient laptop finally died, taking with it several projects I hadn't backed up. I couldn't afford a replacement immediately, forcing me to stay late at school to use their computers for assignments. Then my car, which I'd eventually retrieved from my parents' house while they were at work, broke down completely. The repair estimate was more than the vehicle was worth, and I had no choice but to sell it for parts and rely on public transportation, adding hours to my commute each week. During a particularly rough stretch when I caught the flu but couldn't afford to miss work, I found myself on the bus, feverish and miserable, wondering if my mother had been right. Maybe I would end up begging to come home. But whenever those thoughts surfaced, I would remember the cold way they had dismissed my dreams, the ease with which they had thrown me out, and determination would flood back, stronger than before. I would make it without them, even if it killed me. The turning point in this phase of my life came unexpectedly. A regular customer at Soundwave, Ryan, ran a small recording studio that worked primarily with local bands. When his assistant quit suddenly, he asked Carlos if he knew anyone who could fill in temporarily. "I've got just the kid," Carlos said, pointing at me. "He's hungry to learn and works harder than anyone I know." The temporary gig paid barely more than minimum wage, but it was actual studio experience. I jumped at the opportunity, rearranging my entire schedule to make it work. For 3 weeks, I essentially lived at the studio, learning everything I could, asking questions, absorbing the workflow, and going above and beyond what was asked of me. When the original assistant decided not to return, Ryan offered me the position permanently. "You've got good ears," he said simply, "and you don't complain about the hours. That's rare. Taking the studio job meant cutting back on my hours at Soundwave. Carlos understood completely. "This is what you've been working toward," he told me. "I'd be offended if you didn't take it." A year and a half after being kicked out, I was working in an actual recording studio. The pay was still modest, and I kept one weekend shift at the diner to make ends meet, but I was on a career path I had chosen for myself. The first time I heard a song I had helped record on local radio, I was alone in the apartment. Jake and Marcus were both at work. I sat on our secondhand couch, listening to something I had been part of creating, broadcast to thousands of people. In that moment, I wished I had someone to share it with. The accomplishment felt hollow without family to celebrate it. Despite everything, there was still a 17-year-old inside me who wanted his parents to be proud. I picked up my phone and scrolled to my mother's number, my thumb hovering over the call button. Then I remembered her smirk, her absolute certainty that I would fail, and I put the phone down. They hadn't reached out once in 18 months. They hadn't bothered to check if I was alive or dead. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of hearing about my success now. Instead, I texted Darlene, Carlos, and my roommates. These were the people who had believed in me when it mattered. They were my family now, chosen rather than born into, and all the more valuable for it. 3 years after leaving home, my persistence began paying dividends. Ryan's studio had grown steadily, attracting bigger local acts and even some regional bands with modest followings. My role had expanded from basic assistance to actual engineering work, with Ryan trusting me to handle recording sessions for smaller clients. The community college courses had given me a solid technical foundation, but the hands-on experience at the studio was invaluable. I developed a reputation for innovative approaches to common recording problems and for being able to make artists feel comfortable during sessions. "You've got away with neurotic lead singers," Ryan joked after I talked a particularly difficult vocalist through a challenging recording session. "Must be all that practice dealing with difficult personalities." If only he knew. The real breakthrough came when Meridian Sound, a mid-size production company working with nationally recognized indie artists, held a workshop for emerging audio engineers. Ryan encouraged me to attend, even giving me the day off. "Take your portfolio," he advised. "These kinds of events are where connections happen." The workshop was hosted by James Anderson, a Grammy-nominated producer known for his work with alternative rock bands. I arrived early, nervous but determined to make the most of the opportunity. During the hands-on portion of the workshop, James noticed my approach to a mixing challenge he had set. "Interesting choice," he commented, watching me work. "Most people would have compressed that guitar track differently." "I'm trying to preserve the dynamic range while still fitting it in the mix," I explained. Surprised he had singled me out. Sometimes the conventional approach smooths out the very elements that give a track character. He nodded thoughtfully. "What's your name?" "Heath Miller." "Where are you working now?" I told him about Ryan's studio, downplaying my role slightly out of modesty. James handed me his card. "Send me your portfolio," he said. "We're looking for an intern at Meridian. The pay is terrible, but the experience would be valuable." That evening, I meticulously curated my best work, second-guessing every selection, rewriting the email a dozen times before finally hitting send at 2 in the morning. 3 days later, James called to offer me the internship. The position at Meridian was a significant step up professionally, but it came with financial challenges. The base pay was even less than what I'd been making, and the hours were longer and less predictable. I kept one weekend shift at Ryan's studio to supplement my income and moved to an even smaller apartment to cut expenses. The sacrifice was worth it. In my first month at Meridian, I worked on sessions with artists whose music I had grown up listening to. I absorbed techniques from seasoned professionals, stayed late to watch mixing sessions I wasn't required to attend, and volunteered for the projects no one else wanted. James noticed my dedication. "Most interns are watching the clock," he remarked one night, when we were both still working at 11 p.m. "You act like you're getting paid a lot more than you are." "I'm investing in my future," I told him simply. 6 months into the internship, an unusual piece of mail arrived at my apartment, a Christmas card with my parents' return address. Inside was a generic holiday greeting with a brief note in my mother's handwriting: "Hope you are well. Mom and Dad." No apology. No acknowledgement of the time that had passed. No real personal message at all. It might as well have been sent to a distant acquaintance, rather than their only son. I placed the card on my kitchen counter and stared at it for a long time. Was this an olive branch? A guilt offering? Or just my mother's way of maintaining appearances, able to tell her friends that of course they stayed in touch with their son? Whatever the motivation, it was too little, too late, and far too impersonal. I threw the card away without responding. A week later, I ran into my mother's friend Susan at a coffee shop. She did a double take when she saw me, clearly surprised by my presence. "Heath! My goodness, I hardly recognized you." Her eyes took in my longer hair and the tattoo on my forearm, a sound wave pattern I'd gotten to commemorate my first major credit on a released album. "Hello, Mrs. Peterson," I said politely, though I was already looking for an exit strategy from the conversation. "Your parents talk about you all the time," she said, though her expression suggested otherwise. "They're keeping tabs on you, you know. Your father mentioned you're working at some music place, so they were monitoring me from a distance." The knowledge was unsettling. They had made no attempt to contact me directly in years, save for that impersonal Christmas card, but they were apparently discussing me with their social circle. "Please tell them I'm doing very well," I said with forced politeness. "If they're interested in my life, they have my number." I walked away before she could respond. The encounter left me unsettled for days afterward. Why keep track of me if they had no interest in reconciliation? Was it just to know if they had been right about my inevitable failure? The internship at Meridian turned into a junior engineer position after a year. The promotion came with a significant pay increase that finally allowed me to live comfortably without multiple jobs. I moved to a decent one-bedroom apartment, bought new equipment for my home setup, and even started putting money into savings each month. My career continued its upward trajectory. I was assigned as lead engineer on sessions for up-and-coming bands, given more responsibility for final mixes, and even received my first official production credit on an EP that generated buzz in industry circles. The professional success should have been purely satisfying, but it was accompanied by a nagging emptiness I couldn't quite shake. I had proven myself capable of making it without my parents' support, yet part of me still craved their acknowledgement. Would they be proud if they knew what I had accomplished? Did it even matter anymore? During this period, I began dating more seriously. Previous relationships had been casual, limited by my grueling work schedule and financial instability. Now I had the time and resources to invest in my personal life. I met Amelia at a showcase for one of Meridian's artists. She worked in music publishing and had a quick wit and genuine passion for supporting musicians. Our first date lasted 6 hours, conversation flowing effortlessly from industry gossip to childhood memories to future dreams. As we grew closer, I noticed how differently Amelia talked about her family. She called her parents regularly, consulted them on major decisions, and spoke of them with obvious affection and respect. When she mentioned going home for her father's birthday, the casual way she included family gatherings in her life highlighted their absence in mine. "You never talk about your family," she observed one evening as we cooked dinner at my apartment. "Are they not in the picture?" I hesitated, then gave her the abbreviated version. "We had a falling out when I was 17. They didn't support my career choice, and I ended up leaving home. We haven't really been in contact since." Amelia looked shocked. "For 10 years? Have you tried reaching out?" "They kicked me out," I said more sharply than I intended. "They made it clear I wasn't welcome unless I followed their plan for my life." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm not judging. I just can't imagine going that long without speaking to my parents. Even when we fight, we always work it out eventually. Some families are different," I said, turning back to the stove to hide my expression. Meeting Amelia's family a few months later was an eye-opening experience. Her parents welcomed me warmly, asked thoughtful questions about my work, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. Her father, a high school music teacher, engaged me in a lengthy discussion about recording techniques, while her mother made sure my plate was always full. Driving home from that visit, Amelia asked gently, "Do you think you'll ever reconnect with your parents?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I don't know if there's anything to reconnect to. We didn't have the kind of relationship you have with your family even before I left." "People change," she suggested. 10 years is a long time. I changed the subject. But her words stayed with me. Were my parents different now? Had time softened their rigid expectations? Or were they still the same people who had turned their backs on their son because he wouldn't conform to their vision of success? The question became more pressing when Meridian assigned me to produce an album for The Resonance, an indie band whose previous release had won critical acclaim. It was my biggest opportunity yet, a chance to establish myself as a producer in my own right. The album's completion coincided with its lead single being featured in a popular streaming series, generating significant buzz. When the full album was released, it debuted in the top 50 on the charts and received glowing reviews, with several critics specifically mentioning the production quality. My career had reached a level of success even my parents couldn't dismiss. And for the first time in years, I considered reaching out, not to seek validation, but to show them that their lack of faith had been misplaced. Perhaps now, with tangible success to my name, we could interact as equals rather than as disappointed parents and wayward child. Before I could make that decision, however, the choice was taken out of my hands. The industry magazine Audiocraft ran a feature on emerging producers, with a substantial profile of my work on the Resonance album. The article included my background story, mentioning my early start at 17 and the unconventional path I had taken to success. 3 days after the magazine hit stands, my phone displayed a number I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. My mother was calling. I let the call go to voicemail, then another, and another. Over the next week, my mother called 5 times and my father twice. I listened to the first message, my heart pounding as my mother's voice, slightly older but still familiar, filled my apartment. "Heath, darling, we saw the article about you in that music magazine. We had no idea you were doing so well. Call us back when you get a chance. We'd love to hear from you." Her tone was warm, enthusiastic, as if we'd spoken last week instead of a decade ago. No acknowledgement of the years of silence, the birthday and holidays that had passed without a word, the complete absence of support during my struggle to establish myself. The second message was similar, though she mentioned being concerned that I hadn't returned her call. The third hinted at hurt feelings. By the fifth, her tone had shifted to something more familiar, the slight edge of manipulation I remembered from childhood. "I don't understand why you're ignoring us, Heath. After all, we're still your parents. I would think you'd want to share your success with us." My father's messages were more direct. "Son, call your mother. She's upset that you're not responding." And later, "Heath, this has gone on long enough. Pick up the phone." The sudden attention after years of silence left me reeling. I discussed it with Amelia one evening as we sat on my couch, her head resting on my shoulder. "It feels so calculated," I explained, scrolling through the missed calls. "They ignored me completely until I became successful enough to reflect well on them." Amelia traced patterns on my arm with her fingertip. "That's one interpretation. Maybe seeing the article made them realize what they lost. Maybe they regret how things ended. If they regretted it, they could have called years ago," I pointed out. "They knew where I worked. They could have found me if they wanted to." "True," she conceded. "So what are you going to do?" "Nothing," I said firmly. "They forfeited their right to be part of my success when they slammed the door in my face." But the decision wasn't as simple as I pretended. The calls continued, sporadic but persistent. My mother left tearful voicemails about missing me. My father's messages became increasingly strained, oscillating between commands and awkward attempts at conversation. "We heard you produced that album everyone's talking about," he said in one message. "Never thought those music classes would amount to anything, but I guess I was wrong." It was the closest thing to an admission of error I'd ever heard from him, but it still missed the mark by a wide margin. The situation grew more complicated when my mother began emailing me. Long, emotional messages full of family news and questions about my life. She attached photos of home renovations, neighborhood gatherings, even my old room, preserved exactly as I'd left it. "We always knew you'd come back," she wrote, a statement that made me physically recoil from my screen. They hadn't kept my room as a loving gesture. They'd kept it as proof of their conviction that I would fail. The emails and calls increased around my birthday, Christmas, and other significant dates. Each message carefully avoided any direct apology or acknowledgement of the pain they had caused, instead treating our estrangement as a mutual misunderstanding or a phase I had gone through. My professional success continued to grow during this period. The Resonance album received a Grammy nomination, not a win, but being included in the category was a significant achievement for everyone involved. I was offered a position as a staff producer at Meridian with a substantial salary increase and creative control over project selection. Industry publications began referring to me as an innovative force in production, and other artists requested me specifically for their projects. I was building the career I had always wanted, validating the painful choice I had made a decade earlier. The contrast between my professional fulfillment and personal unresolved issues became more pronounced when I decided to launch my own small production company. Black Box Studios would operate under Meridian's umbrella, but give me more autonomy and the opportunity to develop new talent. Setting up the business required a substantial initial investment. Though I had savings, I needed additional funding to create the studio space I envisioned. As I worked with a financial advisor to explore options, she naturally asked about family resources. Some people get family loans or investments for startup costs, she explained. It's often preferable to bank loans because you can negotiate more flexible terms. I laughed without humor. That's not an option in my case. Yet even as I dismissed the idea, a thought occurred to me. My parents had money. My father's construction business had been quite successful. Would approaching them as a potential investor rather than a returning prodigal change the dynamic between us? The thought disgusted me almost immediately. I didn't want or need their money. What I had built alone, and introducing financial entanglement now would undermine everything I had worked for. I secured a business loan through conventional channels and proceeded with establishing Black Box. The studio space took shape exactly as I had envisioned, a perfect balance of technical excellence and creative atmosphere. At the launch party, surrounded by colleagues, artists, and industry contacts, I found myself scanning the crowd, half expecting to see my parents. They wouldn't be there. Of course, they hadn't been invited, but the instinct to look for them in moments of celebration was apparently hardwired. Amelia noticed my distraction. "You okay?" I nodded, not wanting to admit where my thoughts had gone. Just taking it all in. Hard to believe this is really happening. Later that night, in the quiet of our apartment, Amelia had moved in 6 months earlier. She brought it up again. "I saw you looking around at the party. Were you wishing they were there?" Her perception startled me. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wanted them to see what I've accomplished. Another part is glad they weren't there to take any credit." She considered this. "You know, refusing to deal with them gives them a kind of power over you. They're still affecting your happiness, your moments of success. What would you have me do? Pretend everything's fine? Play happy families after 10 years of silence?" "No," she said carefully. "But maybe hearing them out, once, would help you move forward. Even if it doesn't lead to reconciliation, it might give you closure." The suggestion stayed with me. Was I allowing my parents to cast a shadow over my achievements by maintaining the estrangement? Would confronting them directly, on my terms, from a position of strength and success, provide the resolution I needed? Before I could decide, another complication arose. A profile piece in Business Insider about young entrepreneurs included a section on Black Box Studios and my journey from homeless teenager to successful producer and business owner. The article was more personal than I would have preferred, detailing my early struggles after being kicked out and the series of minimum wage jobs that had sustained me while I built my skills. The writer framed it as an inspirational story of perseverance, but seeing my private hardships laid out in print was uncomfortable. The day after publication, my father called. Unlike his previous messages, he didn't bother with pleasantries. "This article makes us look like monsters," he said without preamble when I finally answered. "Your mother is devastated. Is that what you wanted?" 10 years of suppressed anger bubbled to the surface. "I didn't write the article, Dad. I just lived it." "You could have refused to discuss personal matters," he countered. "Keeping family business private used to mean something." "Family?" I repeated incredulously. "You forfeited the right to call us that when you threw me out with $50 and the clothes on my back." There was a long silence before he spoke again, His voice strained. "We made mistakes. We thought you'd come back. So you could say, 'I told you so.' So I could admit you were right and fall in line with your plans for my life? So we could work things out," he insisted. "We never expected you to stay away for years." The conversation deteriorated from there, old wounds reopened on both sides. We ended the call with nothing resolved, both more hurt than before. That night, I told Amelia, "You were wrong." Talking to them didn't help at all. She held me as I processed the renewed pain. Maybe one conversation isn't enough. 10 years of silence takes time to unravel. Or maybe some relationships can't be fixed, I countered. Maybe too much damage was done. Maybe, she conceded. But I think you need to know for sure, one way or the other. Otherwise, this unresolved pain will always be there, even in your happiest moments. I knew she was right. The question was whether I had the courage to find out if reconciliation was possible, and whether my parents were capable of the honesty and accountability such a process would require. 3 months after that disastrous phone call with my father, I made a decision. The unresolved tension was affecting my work, my relationship, and my peace of mind. I needed closure, whether that meant reconciliation or a final acknowledgement that some bridges stay burned. I called my mother and suggested meeting at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory. She agreed immediately, her voice bright with hope I couldn't share. I set clear parameters. Just the 3 of us, for 1 hour, in public. "We can talk about whatever you want after that," I told her. "But this first meeting has conditions." She agreed to everything without hesitation, which should have been my first warning sign. The day of the meeting, I arrived early, selecting a table in a quiet corner where we wouldn't be overheard, but would still be surrounded by other people. Amelia had offered to come for moral support, but I felt this was something I needed to do alone. My parents arrived exactly on time, looking older than I remembered, but essentially unchanged. My father still carried himself with rigid posture, his expression serious and assessing. My mother still wore her carefully maintained appearance like armor, her clothes expensive and tasteful, her makeup flawless. They spotted me across the room, and something flickered across my mother's face, surprise, perhaps, at the man her son had become. I had changed significantly in 10 years. My hair was longer. I had the tattoo on my forearm, and I dressed in a style that would have horrified her when I lived at home. "Heath," she breathed as they reached the table, moving as if to hug me. I stepped back slightly, and she adjusted, extending her hand instead. I shook it briefly, then my father's, before we all sat down. An awkward silence fell as we studied each other across the table. I had imagined this moment many times, but now that it was here, I found myself at a loss for words. My mother broke the silence. "You look well," she said, her eyes taking in every detail of my appearance. "Though you could use a haircut." Just like that, we were back to the dynamic of my childhood. I had to suppress a bitter laugh. "I'm not here for grooming advice," I said evenly. "I agreed to this meeting because there are things that need to be said, and then maybe we can all move forward." My father cleared his throat. "We've been trying to reach you for months. You could have returned a call." "I could have," I acknowledged. "Just like you could have reached out any time in the past decade, but you didn't. Not until I was successful enough to reflect well on you." "That's not fair," my mother protested. "We didn't know how to contact you." "Mrs. Peterson knew where I worked years ago," I countered. "You told me yourself you were keeping tabs on me. You chose not to make contact until my success became public." My father's jaw tightened. "We made mistakes," he said stiffly. "But so did you, running away instead of talking things through." "Running away?" I repeated incredulously. "You kicked me out. You gave me 30 minutes to pack and $50 to live on. I was 17 years old. We thought you'd come to your senses," my mother insisted. "That you'd realize how difficult the real world is and come home ready to discuss your future rationally." "You wanted me to fail," I said bluntly. "You expected me to come crawling back so you could dictate the terms of my life." My father shifted uncomfortably. "We wanted what was best for you. Security, stability, a respectable career." "No," I corrected him. "You wanted what you thought was best for me without any consideration for my talents, passions, or happiness." And look how well that turned out, my mother said with a brittle smile. You're successful now. Maybe our approach worked after all. The comment stunned me with its audacity. Are you taking credit for my success, after having absolutely nothing to do with it? We raised you with discipline and high standards, my father argued. Those values don't disappear overnight. I took a deep breath, reminding myself we were in public. Let me be very clear. I succeeded despite you. Not because of you. I succeeded because strangers showed me more kindness than my own parents did. I succeeded because I worked 60-hour weeks while putting myself through school. I succeeded because I was determined to prove you wrong about me. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but I had known her too long to be manipulated by them. We've missed so much of your life, she said tremulously. Graduations, career milestones. We didn't even know about your girlfriend until we read about her in that article. That was your choice, I said firmly. You chose your vision of my future over a relationship with the actual person I am. We want to be part of your life now, my father said, his voice unusually subdued. Whatever mistakes were made in the past, you're still our son. Being part of my life requires acknowledging what actually happened, I replied. Not this revisionist history where you made some mistakes but ultimately had my best interests at heart. You abandoned me because I wouldn't comply with your plans. You expected me to fail without your support. You made no effort to contact me during the years I was struggling. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. We thought about you every day. Thinking isn't the same as acting, I pointed out. I needed parents who would support me even if they disagreed with my choices. Instead, I got conditional love based on compliance. What do you want from us? My father asked bluntly. An apology? Fine. We're sorry. We handled things badly. Is that enough to move forward? I looked at him for a long moment. An apology would be a start, but only if it's genuine. Only if it comes with real understanding of the harm caused, not just regret that things didn't go according to plan. Of course we regret what happened, my mother insisted. We lost our only child for 10 years. Do you regret kicking me out, or do you regret that I didn't come back begging as predicted? I asked. Because those are very different things. The question hung in the air between us. My mother looked away, unable to meet my gaze. My father's expression hardened. We did what we thought was necessary at the time, he said finally. Maybe it was too harsh. But you were being unreasonable, throwing away opportunities many kids would kill for. And there it was, the fundamental disconnect that had driven us apart. Even now, he couldn't see that his vision for my life wasn't necessarily what would bring me fulfillment or happiness. I've built a life I'm proud of, I said quietly. A career I love, relationships that are healthy and supportive, financial security on my own terms. I didn't throw away opportunity. I created different ones that were right for me. And we're proud of what you've accomplished, my mother jumped in. So proud. All we want now is to be part of your life again. I studied their faces, searching for genuine understanding, genuine remorse. What I saw instead was the same people who had rejected me, now wanting access to the successful adult I'd become without having to truly reckon with their actions. If we're going to have any relationship moving forward, I said carefully, it needs to be based on reality, not a comfortable fiction. It needs to acknowledge the past honestly, and it needs to respect who I actually am, not who you wish I was. We can do that, my mother said quickly. My father was more hesitant. What exactly are you asking for? I'm not asking for anything, I clarified. I'm setting boundaries. I won't pretend everything is fine when it isn't. I won't engage in revisionist history to make anyone feel better, and I won't tolerate any attempts to control my life or choices now. That seems reasonable, my father said stiffly. There's one more thing, I added. I heard through industry contacts that you've been having financial difficulties with the construction company. My father's expression darkened. Who told you that? It doesn't matter, I said. What matters is that I want to be clear. I'm not interested in a relationship based on what I can do for you financially. If that's part of the motivation for reconnecting, we should end this meeting now. How dare you? My mother gasped. We would never. But my father's expression told a different story. There had been calculation in their timing, just as I'd suspected. Your business is struggling, I continued, looking directly at my father. You've lost contracts to competitors. The housing market in your area is down. You're overextended on several properties." He didn't deny it. "Every business has ups and downs. We'll recover." "I'm sure you will," I said evenly. "But you'll do it without my help. I built my company from nothing, without family connections or investment. I'm not interested in bailing out the people who bet against my success." The atmosphere chilled noticeably. My father's expression hardened into something more familiar, the disapproving look I remembered from childhood. "So, that's it? You hold a grudge forever?" Very mature. "It's not a grudge," I corrected him. "It's a boundary. And your reaction to it tells me everything I need to know about whether you've really changed." My mother reached across the table, trying to take my hand. I let her, but didn't return the pressure of her fingers. "Heath, darling, we just want to be a family again," she pleaded. "Is that so wrong?" "It's not wrong to want that," I acknowledged. "But it is wrong to expect it without doing the work to repair what was broken. It's wrong to think you can step back into my life and pick up as if the last 10 years never happened." I gently withdrew my hand and stood up. "I need to get back to the studio. Think about what I've said. If you're genuinely interested in building a new relationship based on honesty and respect, I'm willing to try. But if you're looking for the compliant son you lost or financial assistance, this won't work." My father remained seated, his expression closed and unreadable. My mother stood, tears tracking down her carefully made-up face. "Please don't walk away again," she whispered. "I'm not walking away," I told her. "I'm setting terms for moving forward. The ball is in your court now." I left the coffee shop feeling lighter than I had in years. Regardless of what they decided, I had spoken my truth. I had faced them as an equal, not as the frightened 17-year-old on their porch. Whatever happened next would be on my terms, not theirs. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Amelia. "How did it go?" I smiled as I typed my response. "Better than expected. I'll tell you everything tonight. I love you." For the first time in years, I felt truly free of my parents' shadow. Whether they chose to accept the boundaries I'd set or not, I had reclaimed my narrative and my power. The future, whatever it held, was mine to shape. 5 years have passed since that pivotal meeting in the coffee shop. At 32, I look back on my journey with a perspective I couldn't have imagined at 17, standing on my parents' porch with nothing but a backpack and wounded pride. Black Box Studios has grown beyond my initial vision, now occupying a renovated warehouse with state-of-the-art equipment and a staff of 12. We've worked on albums that have topped charts, won awards, and more importantly, helped artists realize their creative visions. The struggling teenager who washed dishes to survive now runs a 7-figure business, mentoring young talent and creating opportunities I wish I'd had. Amelia and I married 3 years ago in a small ceremony surrounded by the people who had supported us both. Darlene was there, still treating me like the lost boy she'd taken in all those years ago. Carlos came with his wife, proud as any father would be. Ryan, James, and other colleagues, who had become friends, made up our unconventional family. My parents were not present. After our coffee shop meeting, they had made sporadic attempts at contact, still never quite acknowledging the full reality of what had happened. The breaking point came when my father called with a business proposition that was thinly veiled attempt to secure funding for his struggling company. "I thought we could help each other out," he had said. "Family supporting family." I declined politely but firmly, reiterating the boundaries I had set. He hadn't called again, and I had finally accepted that some relationships cannot and should not be salvaged. The healing process hasn't been linear. There are still moments when I feel the absence of traditional family, particularly around holidays or major life events. There are still nights when I dream of the 17-year-old I was, scared and alone. But these moments no longer define me or my future. Working with a therapist helped me understand that my parents were products of their own upbringing and limitations. My father's rigid expectations stemmed from his own father's harsh criticism. My mother's obsession with appearances came from her insecurities, as someone who had relied on beauty for validation. Understanding didn't excuse their actions, but it helped me release some of the anger I had carried. Forgiveness isn't about them, my therapist explained. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of resentment. It took time, but I eventually reached a place where I could wish them well without wanting them in my life. I could acknowledge the good they had done alongside the harm. I could see them as flawed humans rather than the all-powerful figures they had been in my childhood. The most meaningful aspect of my journey has been the opportunity to help others facing similar challenges. 3 years ago, I established the Foundation for Creative Independence, a nonprofit that provides scholarships, mentoring, and housing assistance to young people pursuing arts education without family support. The foundation works with community colleges and trade schools to identify students with potential but limited resources. We provide not just financial assistance, but practical support, a network of industry professionals who volunteer as mentors, workshops on financial literacy and career development, and perhaps most importantly, a community of peers who understand the unique challenges of building a life without traditional support systems. Twice a year, I speak at community colleges about alternative paths to success, sharing my story without sugarcoating the difficulties. I tell them about sleeping in parks, about working 3 jobs while studying, about the constant fear of failure. But I also tell them about the people who helped me along the way, about the small victories that kept me going, about the satisfaction of building something meaningful on my own terms. Success isn't just about proving others wrong, I tell them. Eventually, it has to become about proving yourself right, that you were worthy of believing in your own vision, even when no one else did. Last month, we awarded scholarships to 5 students, all from challenging backgrounds, all pursuing careers in creative fields despite opposition or lack of support. Watching them accept their awards, seeing the mix of pride and relief on their faces, I felt a sense of purpose that transcended personal achievement. This is how healing happens, not just by overcoming your own trauma, but by transforming it into something that helps others avoid similar pain. My relationship with Amelia has been another source of growth and healing. Her family has embraced me completely, showing me what healthy family dynamics look like. Her father calls regularly to discuss music and industry news. Her mother sends care packages and remembers my birthday. They give advice when asked but respect our independence and choices. Through Amelia and her family, I've learned that love doesn't have to be conditional, that disagreement doesn't have to mean rejection, that family can be supportive without being controlling. These lessons have made me a better partner, a better friend, and eventually, I hope, a better father. We're expecting our first child in 4 months. The prospect of parenthood has prompted deep reflection on the kind of father I want to be, the values I want to instill, the relationship I hope to build with my child. I am determined to break the cycle of conditional love and rigid expectations. I want our child to feel secure in our support, even when making choices we might not understand. I want them to pursue their own passions and define success on their own terms. Most of all, I want them to know they are loved for who they are, not for who we wish them to be. The journey from that night on my parents' porch to where I stand today has been longer and harder than I could have imagined. There were moments when giving up seemed like the only option, when the weight of rejection and the struggle for survival nearly broke me. But each obstacle overcome, each small victory achieved, built the resilience and determination that would eventually lead to success. What I've learned, more than anything, is that rejection sometimes be the greatest gift when it forces you to build something authentic. Being cast out from the life that was planned for me created the space to discover the life I was meant for. The door that slammed in my face that night opened a path to possibilities I might never have explored otherwise. If you're watching this and facing your own version of that moment standing alone, unsure of your next step, know this: your worth isn't determined by those who reject you. Your potential isn't limited by others' vision for your life. And family isn't just about blood, it's about who stands with you when it matters most. The family I've built through friendship, love, and shared purpose has proven stronger and more nurturing than the one I was born into. The success I've found by following my own path has brought deeper fulfillment than any prescribed route could have offered. The person I've become through struggle and persistence is someone I'm proud to be. 10 years ago, my mother predicted I would return begging within a month. 10 years later, it was my parents reaching out, seeking connection to the successful adult their rejected child had become. The irony isn't lost on me, but neither is the lesson. We are all more capable of resilience and reinvention than we know until circumstances force us to discover our strength. What challenges are you facing right now? Have you ever had to rebuild after a major rejection or setback? Share your story in the comments below. I read every one and try to respond. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more reflections on overcoming obstacles and defining success on your own terms. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share it with them. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in our struggles makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember, the doors that close behind you don't define your future, the ones you open yourself do. Until next time, this is Heath Miller, wishing you the courage to follow your own path, wherever it may lead.